Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Bonnie Quinn with your top stories. President Donald Trump defends his economic record as he delivers the longest ever State of the Union address.
Our nation is back, bigger, better, richer, and stronger than ever before.
Wall Street's tech rebound surges into Asia, sending markets in South Korea and Taiwan to fresh records. Plus, a plot twist in the battle for Warner Brothers Discovery as Paramount Skydance sweetens its offer. It's looking to knock out Netflix. Let's take a look at these markets then, because we did see a little bit of a rebound in yesterday's session. Jitters from AI just being put aside for the moment. Now, that said, futures have erased some gains this morning, this after the State of the Union address. Perhaps markets were looking for more in the way of policy proposals. The dollar also weakening after the State of the Union address, although this is a separate story which we'll get to in a moment. I do want to mention that software was one of the better performers in yesterday's US session. That extended into Asia and came after Anthropic basically said it was going to partner with many of these companies, from investment banks to LegalZoom to other software companies, and that calmed markets ever so slightly, that it's not looking to rival them or take over in any way. Now, the yen is a little bit of a different story. We're seeing particularly long-end yields rise now. Takaichi has nominated 2 members to the Bank of Japan board to replace some retiring members. Now, they're very seen as dovish and reflationist, and that is definitely having an impact on Japanese assets today. The market clearly believing Takaichi and her fear of interest rate hikes. And as you can see, the yen trading at 155.63. It was actually above 156 a little bit earlier. All right, risk events on your radar for today. After market, we get Leonardo earnings. And then at 9:20 UK time, the big kahuna, NVIDIA earnings. We're also getting Salesforce today, so we'll see what they both have to say about the impact of AI. Merz is in China as well today and tomorrow. The German Chancellor at the moment in China trying to do deals with big business and his delegation. The tech rally on Wall Street has extended into the Asian session, so let's get an update now on how Asian markets are actually doing with Winnie Su in Tokyo. Winnie.
Yeah, morning, Bonnie. We are seeing that MSCI Asia and also the dollar index both are rising for a third day on the back of this optimism of tech overnight, as well as a weaker dollar. Now, when it comes to the stock space, we're actually seeing that Asians tech gauge up about 3%, supported also by that deal between AMD and Meta, so reassuring investors around these massive capex spending. When it comes to the TAIEX index up about 2%, we actually saw that Taiwanese stocks saw its biggest foreign buying in about 20 years just yesterday. Now, flip a board and take a look at how a Korean market is doing, because actually Korean stocks also hitting record. But the interesting part is that Kospi here is crossing that 6,000 level for the very first time, and leading gains here again are Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix up about 1%. And with that, we are actually seeing South Korea's market cap over crossing that of France. And in fact, it actually surpassed that of Germany just last month. So right now, South Korea's market is actually the world's 9th biggest stock market. And flip a board and take a look at what's going on in Japan, because the Japanese yen that is actually in focus right now. We are seeing the Japanese yen about that 156 level, pairing some of its earlier gains after, as you just mentioned, that Takaichi's government actually nominated 2 Bank of Japan's board members who are both seen as reflationists and actually supportive of accommodative monetary policy, and hence that overall weakness in the yen is supporting the Japanese stocks, both Nikkei and the Topics extending gains. But we are actually seeing that the Nikkei is actually outperforming Topics just because financials are actually weighing on the broader benchmark, given Takaichi's cautious stance against BOJ's rate hike path. Back to you, Vani.
Fascinating developments which we'll keep watching. Winnie, thank you so much. Winnie Su there in Tokyo. President Donald Trump offered a defiant defense of his policies and economic record, declaring the U.S. back bigger, better, richer and stronger than ever before in the annual State of the Union address. The president staged his version of a pep rally ahead of November's midterm elections. With Supreme Court justices sitting close by, the president criticised their recent tariff ruling and said levies were essential to boosting U.S. finances.
Our nation is back, bigger, better, richer and stronger than ever before. I used these tariffs, took in hundreds of billions of dollars to make great deals for our country, both economically and on a national security basis. Almost all countries and corporations want to keep the deal that they already made, right, Scott? Knowing that the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal could be far worse for them, and therefore they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement.
Delivering the Democratic rebuttal, Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger said most Americans are worse off under President Trump.
Since this president took office last year, his reckless trade policies have forced American families to pay more than $1,700 each in tariff costs. Small businesses have suffered, farmers have suffered, some losing entire markets. Everyday Americans are paying the price.
Let's bring in Rosalind Matheson now, Bloomberg's chief Asia correspondent. Ros, it was so fascinating watching this 1 hour, 47-minute speech. Did the president have any clear domestic messages to the American people? Anything about new policies or new ideas?
Well, not a lot of new policies, but certainly a lot of messaging. As you were saying, this was very much targeted in that very lengthy State of the Union speech at the US voter. And that's with one eye on the fact that the US midterms are really getting closer and closer in the window for him. And he's really wanting to assure US voters that he's doing what he needs to on the economy, that their lives are better. Inflation is behaving, jobs are there, prices are coming down of essential goods. And all of that. And so he's really trying to reinforce that message around affordability. So there was a lot of pep rally type commentary from Donald Trump, a lot of criticism of the Democrats, but not a lot of fresh policies. There were a few nuggets, a bit around getting tech companies to build power plants, for example. The idea is therefore that power prices for everybody might go down, because that's a real concern of US voters, is rising electricity prices. So that there was that. There was a promise that the US government would top up non-employer 401ks to the tune of $1,000 a year, although it's unclear exactly also how that would work. But broadly, it was just about the messaging more than new policy announcements and new promises on the economy. As you were saying, that kind of brash commentary about the US being better, bolder, braver under his watch, and certainly trying to, reassure voters that their lives in particular are going to be better.
Yeah, definitely trying to inject some enthusiasm now. Of course, many of these are live issues. Obviously, the tariffs seem to be changing day by day. And also, Iran. What do we learn on the president's plans for trade, foreign policy and more?
Well, a sense of defiance on trade, but really, again, nothing new, which was quite similar across his entire speech, was, lamenting the Supreme Court's decision in front of some of the Supreme justices who were sitting there listening to his words. But, again, pushing on with the idea that he's going to use investigations and other mechanisms to try and rebuild some of his tariff regime, that he will come back with other mechanisms to inflict tariffs on other countries, and warning countries don't walk away from the trade deals that we've built, because what could come next could be worse. And that's in line with his messaging in the aftermath of that court ruling. And so, again, geared towards the US voters, saying these tariffs have helped you, although, as we know, tariffs generally get borne by importers and passed on to consumers and not ending up in government coffers. And again, foreign policy was a smaller part of his speech, which was obviously by design, and the main messaging around that was, again, to say to US people, the US is stronger around the world. We're using prosperity through peace around the world, touting the conflicts that he says he's ended, saying we're making the world a safer place for Americans. So there wasn't a lot of fresh policy on the foreign side. There was, interestingly though, no mention really in his speech of China. the second biggest economy on the planet and whose leader he's going to be meeting in March. No mention really of China in the speech, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, interesting for what it had and what it didn't have. Ronald, thank you so much. That's Bloomberg's Chief Asia Correspondent, Rosalind Matheson. The dollar extended declines as President Trump spoke. Let's bring in Bloomberg MLive strategist Mark Cranfield. Mark, what's driving the dollar lower today? Is it more about the US, the State of the Union address, or other countries and what's happening?
Well, it's more to do really with other things than the United States for once. And as Winnie was saying earlier, we are a very bullish scenario here in Asia today. Once again, huge amounts of money flowing into Asia, particularly targeting Taiwan and Korean equities. And it's their currencies which are really helping to drive the moves today. So we've had tremendous strength in the Korean won, the Taiwanese dollar. They're really at the forefront of what's happening, along with the Chinese currency as well. So that mood has really helped to deflate the US dollar across the board. And on top of that, major currencies are getting a boost because we had some Australian inflation data today, which was quite a bit higher than expected, and that is now reinforcing the idea that the Reserve Bank of Australia will raise interest rates when they meet, either at the next meeting or at the one after that. So traders are pricing in pretty much a surety that there will be another 25 basis point hike before too long. So the Australian dollar has been one of the key performers today. That's helped to lift the euro and the pound and the rest of the space. The yen has been a little bit of an outlier, but that's more to do with the Bank of Japan and who they've chosen as the potential new candidates there. But all in all, pretty much across the board, whether it's Asian currencies or G10 currencies, the story is pretty clear. People want to move money away from the US dollar into some of the leading currencies in the rest of the space.
Yeah, and then I also want to ask you about private credit, Mark, because we're seeing more and more voices flagging risks. I'm curious, is it getting to be a bigger concern for the broader markets now?
This is always a bit of an issue for people who are investors. The credit markets themselves, fixed income, are huge markets, massive investments. They tend to be relatively quiet, and traders and investors like to see things happen in a gradual way. Private credit is in the background of this, and for a lot of people hoping that it was something they would never really have to worry about too much. Now it's starting to encroach on their territory. Bloomberg has several stories running today that people are getting a little bit concerned about what's happening there, particularly because one or two funds are trying to sell some of their bonds or their holdings into the secondary market. Now, private credit, for a lot of people, is not really designed to have a secondary market. It's really a buy and hold of type of market. People hold it to maturity, so it shouldn't really infringe on these kind of markets. And that's a bit of a concern to everybody. Now, the issue here is that in the investment grade credit space, a lot of ETFs are now the main holders of these bonds. And they tend to be a little bit fickle when it comes to whether they're buying or selling. So if there's a nudge for them to start selling, it could be a torrent. It could happen very quickly, and a little bit of loss of control of the markets here. So people are very concerned that if the private credit space starts to weaken and that transfers across into the investment grade space, it could really feed on one another, and suddenly you get a rapid unwinding of people really rushing out to the exit to try and get rid of their bonds. And the market is just not designed for that. It's very early stages, but then people with long memories can recall that the previous credit crisis started small and then got a lot bigger. That's why people are starting to get a little bit worried here.
A private version of a bank run, if you will. Mark, thank you so much. Bloomberg MLive strategist Mark Cranfield. Still ahead, self-driving startup Wayve taps investors to fund its robo-taxi ambitions. We'll have details later in the show. But first, tech rebounds as AI startup Anthropic tempers investor concerns. More details next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. A little breaking news now. Leonardo out with results a little early. Full year orders are beating estimates, coming in at 23.78 billion euros. That was better than the 23.24 billion that markets expected. Revenue again was a beat, and full year EBITDA also beating estimates, coming in at 1.75 billion euros, just beating the 1.73 billion that markets were anticipating. So once again, Leonardo out with a beat, just on orders and on revenue. US stocks rebounded yesterday after comments from AI startup Anthropic reassured investors. The move follows the AI so-called scare trade that's been pummeling software companies in particular. To tell us more now, I'm joined by Bloomberg senior market strategist Neil Campling. So what exactly did Anthropic say that suddenly caused market sentiment to change?
Yeah, I think it was yesterday's more a showcase of some of the products that they've already announced in the last few weeks. So we didn't get any new concerns or new risks. It was about partnering with many of these other companies. But I think what it's really wanting to be is to talk about, these partnerships as the next stage, and software as a sector in technical indicators for equities. For many of them have been oversold. So it was kind of a relief bounce that we saw. But I think the next stage is who owns what we call the agentic layer. And the jury's still out on that. So it could still be Claude, Anthropic or others. So the partnerships may just be a step until they try and own that contextual data. And that's where the moat is.
Yeah, I mean, Anthropic is a private company, right? So it doesn't have a huge amount of incentive to tell us everything or to tell us what it's thinking or give us forward guidance. And to a certain extent, it's in Anthropic's interest to have these companies continue to stay around for a while, right? Absolutely.
Keep them close to you until you come out with new agentic agents that could potentially be a rival or widen that economic moat that's vital. Again, as I say, the data layer is where the value is going to be over the next few years.
Now, we also saw a blockbuster deal yesterday between Meta and AMD. I want to ask you about the structure of the deal and also what the partners get out of it.
Yeah, so I think it's great for AMD in that it's validation of their technology in the AI data center in particular. And this is the second deal in the last 5 months, having signed a multi-billion-dollar deal with OpenAI in October. So what this is doing, I think before, is that AMD was viewed as a price check on NVIDIA pricing. And now what this deal does is it validates that they have a true alternative infrastructure offering in data center to NVIDIA. So it's a great deal for Meta, increasing the number of suppliers, and a great deal for AMD in valuing the technology. And you may see similar kinds of deals with other hyperscalers, I would say, in coming months.
So it's buying billions of dollars worth of AI gear, and it's also receiving warrants to buy up to 160 million AMD shares in stages. Is that normal, Neil?
It's not necessarily a regular occurrence that you see in some of these big deals. But of course, if you're economically incentivized, then you're supporting those partners. So it's definitely a benefit in terms of you can benefit from AMD's price rise in the future as part of this relationship. So it's a good deal all around, I'd say.
Yeah, it seems like there's definitely a mood out there where these companies are talking about partnerships and we're all working together and we're all supporting each other, and maybe that'll hold the market up and take away some of these fears that are very broadly in the market from time to time. Now, we get the big kahuna later today, NVIDIA. Yeah. Of course, we get Salesforce as well, so we'll have an insight into disruption. But what will we be looking for out of Jensen Huang? Because we hear from him quite a lot.
I think Jensen will probably likely bring another bullish message about the opportunity set and all the indicators, whether we look at their fab partner TSMC's monthly sales and other sort of suggestive, very strong guidance is likely to happen. But the question is there any chance of getting another mic drop moment like we saw in May 2023 when they guided the following quarter revenues 50% above the street? The stock then went up 210% in the following year. That seems pretty unlikely. There's a high bar in terms of expectation, so to beat that is quite tough for them here. And
if I recall rightly, the last couple of quarters they've beaten, but the market hasn't been satisfied.
I think this is often, we saw this 15 years ago when the Apple iPhone, kind of the street caught up with expectations. So this is what we're seeing now. Buy side are ahead of the sell side in terms of their estimates, and to try and come in above the buy side estimates is tough. And let's remember, since August, Nvidia's stock is up 10%. The semiconductor index is up 50%. It's underperformed, so it's going to be difficult for Nvidia really to break out from a trading range. It's been in for some time.
It's going to be hours of prep on that Jensen Huang speech, I'm sure. Neil, thank you so much. Bloomberg senior market strategist Neil Campling there. Coming up, HSBC full-year earnings beat. We'll hear from the chief executive next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. HSBC's full-year profit has beaten expectations as its wealth business fueled another strong year. The chief executive told Bloomberg he remains confident of meeting the bank's updated targets.
We are very pleased with the 2025 results. I think the key message, Haslinda, to take forward is, number one, we are performing, and this performance is delivering good earnings, strong earnings, and is delivering strong growth in all four businesses and all the key indicators that we look at, and strong distributions to our shareholders with the increase of dividend by 14% to 75 cents per dollar. The second key message is that we are transforming with precision, with discipline, and we're doing it at pace, and we expect to be able to conclude a number of the actions we set out to do earlier than initially planned. And the third key takeaway is that we are confident in our ability to meet our upgraded targets, and we're therefore investing for growth to be able to deliver growth. We shared that we expect now for 26, 27, and 28, we've targeted for 26, 27, and 28 revenue growing every year, rising to 5% in 28, and we have targeted a return on tangible equity, excluding notable items, for each of these 3 years of 17% or higher.
But Georges, there are still some concerns. The Hong Kong and Chinese commercial real estate weighing on your numbers. You book a charge of $700 million. Have you seen the worst, and what are you anticipating? When do you see a turnaround?
So first, Hong Kong remains a structurally high-growth economy, and we have strong conviction in the opportunities available for us in Hong Kong. We have a market leadership position, and we're consolidating our market leadership. I mean, testament to that, as you called out earlier, Haslinda, is the privatization of Hang Seng Bank, which we completed ahead of time. The growth opportunities are multiple. Hong Kong is on track or poised to become the world's largest cross-border wealth hub before the end of the decade. We have a leadership position to capture these opportunities. Hong Kong is a major trading hub and the super connector between the mainland, and the world, and those flows. We have a leadership role in capturing these opportunities. So these underlying structural growth opportunities are real. Insofar the Hong Kong commercial real estate is concerned, we've always believed, and we continue to believe, that this is a cycle. We know this market very well, right? 161 years in this market. If it's a cycle, when we look through the cycle, we are constructive and positive about the medium to long term. We already see signs of normalization in the residential space. We already see some easing because of interest rates coming off and the supply-demand dynamic improving. And we will support our customers in the short term, but we remain constructive of how it will evolve in the medium to long term.
The HSBC Group CEO speaking with Bloomberg's Haslinda Amin. Coming up, President Trump takes aim at Iran in his State of the Union address. We'll unpack his speech next. This is Bloomberg. Live from London, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Vonnie Quinn with your top stories. Donald Trump defends his economic record as the US president delivers the longest ever State of the Union address. Wall Street's tech rebound surges into Asia, sending markets in South Korea and Taiwan to fresh records. Plus, a plot twist in the battle for Warner Brothers Discovery as Paramount Skydance sweetens its offer. It's looking to knock out Netflix. Let's take a look at these markets then, because futures did erase some of their gains as the president was speaking in the State of the Union address. A little bit higher now, but very marginally. We did have a bit of a relief session yesterday after Anthropic seemed to calm fears about it being in partnership with many of these companies that have been getting sold off. And in fact, software was the best performer in the S&P 500 yesterday. That index was up almost 0.8%. The Nasdaq 100 was up 1.2%. So we'll see if that continues today. As you can see, the 10-year yield sticking around that 404 level. So the market pretty stable for the moment. Not so, though, for the yen. We had two new nominees that are seen as dovish and reflationist and definitely anti-hikes, proposed by Sanae Takaichi for the BOJ board to replace two retiring governors, and that caused a little bit of movement in the yen. It was above 156 earlier. Time now for your front page news. And unsurprisingly, Donald Trump's State of the Union address dominates the Financial Times, focusing on President Trump's claims on the economy and on immigration. A similar headline in the Wall Street Journal. It says the U.S. president touted his economic achievements as voters worry about affordability. And the State of the Union address also dominating the foreign press. The headline in Germany's Die Zeit translates to U.S. President Trump defends his administration's work. And you can get a roundup of the stories you need to know to get your day going in today's edition of Daybreak. Terminal subscribers can go to Dayb Go. All right, President Trump declaring the United States is back, bigger, better, richer and stronger than ever before in his annual State of the Union speech. The speech coming at a pivotal moment for the Trump presidency as he confronts falling approval ratings and a number of foreign policy flashpoints ahead of November's midterm elections. And the president offered this defense of his global track record.
And of course, the war in Gaza, which proceeds at a very low level. It's just about there. And I want to thank Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for your help. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jared. And we're working very hard to end the ninth war, the killing and slaughter between Russia and Ukraine, where 25,000 soldiers are dying each and every month. Think of that, 25,000 soldiers are dying a month. A war which would have never happened if I were president. After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue, starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon.
Let's bring in Sudha David-Wilp, Vice President of External Relations and Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Sudha, I want to get to some of these individual flashpoints, if you like, in a moment. But first, just broadly, given how much there is going on foreign policy-wise, everything from, boats in the Caribbean getting bombed to Iran, Ukraine, China relations, did we hear anything new from the president?
Good morning, Vani. I think this was a speech for President Trump to really address domestic issues. Certainly, foreign policy took maybe less than a half an hour in a very long speech. As you mentioned before, it was a record 2 hours in the floor of the House of the Representatives. So he really focused on, showing his accomplishments, which traditionally most presidents do during a State of the Union, and also setting targets for the months ahead. So he talked about lowering costs, about his immigration record, projecting military power, and then also talked about future things, like also readdressing the whole issue about tariffs. And in the clip that you just showed, certainly putting countries like Iran on watch.
Yeah, it was a very interesting speech in that sense. The first, majority of it, basically, as you say, towards the domestic audience, with a little effort at talking about affordability policies and so on. Then he did get to some of the foreign policy announcements, and he talked, as you said, about Iran, put it on watch. Did it sound like the president does still want to reach a diplomatic solution with Iran?
Well, I mean, he definitely boasted about the peace deals that he's achieved. He talked about a record 8 number of peace negotiations that have been successful. And he also obviously gave a nod to Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, which is, of course, a very untraditional diplomatic duo on the world stage. But he did say that it's not his intention to start wars. He talked about peace through strength, but made it very clear that Iran should not have a nuclear arsenal. But of course, he did unwind the nuclear deal that the Obama administration did put in place during Trump's first term. But, I think for Europe, especially here, there were no shocks. It was very much focused on domestic policies. Greenland didn't seem like it was on the table. And there was a clear focus on the Western Hemisphere, which was also very much reflected in the administration's national security strategy from last fall.
Is it fair to say that for outside watchers, there's nothing new to worry about? Or can we draw conclusions like that from the speech at all, Sudha?
Well, President Trump's brand is unpredictability. So I don't think anybody can sort of say everything is going to hum according to a certain pace. There will be surprises ahead. There's 3 years left in this administration. But of course, President Trump also did praise NATO allies for spending more. And again, I think his focus is on the Western Hemisphere, making sure that he keeps up with his narrative of promises delivered, right? Like he talked about secure borders and immigration. And now he's also focused on bringing down healthcare costs, addressing the whole topic of AI and communities that are weary of data centers popping up in their neighborhoods. So I think this is what the administration is focused on. So allies shouldn't necessarily relax, but I do think there's nothing necessarily new. The speech was, of course, very hyper-partisan. He called out the Democrats many times. So that will also, people around the world will also take note of how the hyper-partisanship will still also affect foreign policy moving forward.
Yeah, he was very concerned that the entirety of those present didn't stand for ovations many times, and he chastised them for that. That was more important, it seemed, than the reaction. You mentioned that he talked more domestic policy than foreign policy, and perhaps it's partially because he ran on a platform, right, of not getting involved in other wars and so on. Yet none of these issues have been resolved yet. Not even Russia-Ukraine, which is now in its 5th year.
It's very telling that, the war against Ukraine just received a short note, being the 4th anniversary of the full-scale invasion. And I think that this is a conflict that's obviously vexing the administration, and it's realizing it's going to take obviously more than a day to solve. But this is probably something that he is going to want to have a check on before the midterm elections. As we heard in the piece before, this administration is facing headwinds when it comes to polling ahead of the midterms because of the topics like affordability, but also some independents are getting very skittish of his hardline policies when it comes to immigration enforcement.
Yeah, a huge amount of security talk in the speech as well. Sudha, if you're a Republican running in November, did the president give you anything to run on, or did he do any damage?
Well, I do think, President Trump definitely fit in some of the cultural MAGA issues that are decisive within the speech. But for the most part, the speech did try to use soaring imagery when it comes to, America and the 250th anniversary. So that was, in a way, very patriotic and probably struck a positive tone for many Republicans. And there were some appearances of unity, for example, with the USA men's hockey team that appeared, and also, of course, medals awarded to American service members, which also, both Democrats and Republicans stood for. So I think Republicans will be happy with the speech in the sense that there was no huge fire bombs being thrown, and it also obviously struck a very patriotic tone.
Yep, absolutely. Sudha, thank you so much for all that context and analysis. That is Sudha David-Wilp, Vice President of External Relations and Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund. Warner Brothers Discovery says a new buyout offer from Paramount Skydance could lead to a better deal than its existing agreement with Netflix. The revised offer is $31 a share in cash, an increase of $1. Let's get more now from Bloomberg Deals editor Manuel Baigori. So, Manuel, the board is seriously considering this bid. It hasn't made a final decision because the deadline was up and they were still talking. What happens next?
And definitely, Bonnie, what a series we have here in our hands, right? Before us, tremendous new twist and turn on this magnificent saga, which is fascinating to watch and to report on. And the latest twist, as you will explain, $31 a share offer from Paramount, and the board is now seriously considering. They haven't made up their mind yet as in whether or not they will back the offer, but this decision at least allows for talks to continue. And as you well said, they were late up until midnight when the deadline, 7-day deadline expired. They had to hang up the phone, according to our sources, and hopefully this board decision now allows for some of these lingering questions to be addressed and for talks to continue. Whether or not the board ends up backing the offer remains to be seen, but it's definitely a step in that direction and clearly shows that Paramount isn't giving up just yet, and whether or not Netflix will be ready to come back to the arena with a sweetened offer, that is potentially the next chapter here as well.
Yeah, so the board has to deem the offer superior officially first, and then Netflix gets 4 days. Currently, Netflix has offered $27.75, but it's not taking on the cable networks, right? Will it come back with its own sweetened offer? Can it? Does it have the capacity?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bonnie. We just don't know yet. Normally, companies tend to leave a little bit of firepower in the tank just in case a situation like this arises, but we don't know. At some point, companies tend to draw a line to seeing how high they can go in terms of their proposals. Definitely, this is a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity within the consolidation theme in the entertainment industry that is going to reshape the sector globally, right? So for sure, they will have further thoughts on whether or not they'll increase the offer, but obviously they also need to take care of their own shareholders and financials. And definitely Paramount, which, by the way, we know that they all kicked off this bidding war for the company, for Warner Brothers, several months ago, right? Last year. They are definitely serious and committed about getting this deal done. So it's an interesting, fascinating bidding war here.
David Zaslav is having the best time at the moment. Bloomberg Deals editor Manuel Baigori, thank you so much. Coming up, UK self-driving startup Wayve looks to go head-to-head with the Chinese and US rivals in the robotaxi wars. We'll hear from the CEO next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. The head of the European Commission says the EU will deliver a €90 billion loan to Ukraine, quote, one way or another. Ursula von der Leyen was speaking in Kyiv after Hungary blocked the funding because of an energy dispute with Ukraine. Kyiv is set to run out of funds in a matter of weeks. PayPal closed higher in the United States after Bloomberg revealed rival Stripe is said to be considering an acquisition of all or parts of PayPal. Our sources say Stripe has expressed preliminary interest with deliberations in the early stages. PayPal was an early mover in digital payments but has struggled with modernizing its technologies. And Bloomberg has been told that the Pentagon is threatening to use a Cold War-era law to force Anthropic to let the US military use its AI tools. Anthropic wants guardrails preventing its Claude system from autonomously targeting enemies or conducting mass surveillance. We're told Pentagon officials have laid out a series of consequences, including threats to declare Anthropic a supply chain risk if it doesn't comply by Friday. The self-driving software company Wayve has raised $1.5 billion in new funding. Microsoft and Nvidia and Uber are all among those investing in the Series D round, which brings Wayve's valuation now to $8.6 billion. The company is due to begin commercial trials of its software in robo-taxis with Uber this year. CEO Alex Kendall spoke with Bloomberg Tech Europe's Tom McKenzie.
This raise for us is one that's hugely validating for our approach. We've got ecosystem partners from some of the best in the capital markets, partners throughout the tech ecosystem, and of course 3 of the largest OEMs, largest car companies, backing us to now move into a phase of commercialization.
And how does it shift that effort to scale commercially your technology?
Well, look, I think it's clear that autonomy is now coming to market in a massive way. But there are 3 different business models you can choose to bring autonomy to market with. Of course, you can try and sell your own car. You can try and operate your own robotaxi service. But we've chosen the largest business model of them all, which is licensing our embodied AI software to fleets and automakers around the world.
And you've had your partnership with Nissan over in Japan. Now you have Stellantis and you have Mercedes-Benz as investors, but also as commercial partners as well. What is the nature of those deals? Are these pilot deals or these full commercial deals that you have now with Stellantis and Mercedes?
Well, this is fantastic. We're so excited about deepening our relationships with these 3 automakers in this round. They've been really great partners to us. And across all of them, you have 3 of the 10 largest automakers there from Europe, Japan, North America, spanning mass market to luxury vehicles. And this really demonstrates the breadth of capabilities that our AI has. But we're excited to be working with them all towards not just consumer vehicles that you can buy, but also robotaxis. We work with the cars they build, work with the embedded hardware they have, and make sure that our AI has the intelligence to drive their vehicles. How do you mass manufacture these robotaxis? We're not retrofitting, which is capital intensive and slow. We've got a high margin software licensing business that works with the very largest manufacturers in the world. And so I think these are the questions to be asking about how this technology scales, because the KPIs are going to come. The rate that our AI is learning and increasing in performance is only accelerating with the more deployment exposure.
And to your point, you've also made it clear that this is a software-first approach. We've seen a massive sell-off in software stocks as a result of the disruption from AI. Has that led to any questioning that that is the right approach? Have you had any investors putting pressure on in terms of proving that you can be generating recurring revenue and profitability?
I don't think anyone is questioning that autonomy is going to be in every vehicle in the future. I think that's very clear to the market now. Every vehicle is going to be autonomous. The question is, what is the right technology strategy and what is the right business model?
And you'll have pricing power.
100%.
Wayve CEO Alex Kendall there speaking with Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie. Plenty more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
The pattern of disinflation has been continuing. And I do think, and I've said a number of times, that I do think there is scope, I would expect to see scope for some further easing of policy during most probably the course of this year.
I'm a little more concerned about inflation right now because I think the job market is pretty steady. I think growth is pretty steady. I think there's some promising stuff in the inflation reports, but there's also some warning signs.
Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee there, and before that, the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey. Here are some risk events on your agenda today. After market, we'll get those Paramount Skydance earnings and we'll be all listening to the conference call. I can only imagine what questions will be asked on that call related to any acquisitions that might be in the works. Nvidia earnings as well, a huge one today after the bell. Will it meet investor expectations? We will have to wait and see. And then Friedrich Merz is already in China with a host of business leaders, those delegations trying to do deals and improve relations with that country. Let's have a look at some terminal charts because it's a fascinating day. I want to take a look at this one first. It's chips versus the Mag 7, and as you can see, they're actually catching up to the Magnificent 7. Now, yesterday will have helped because we did see a little bit of a rebound in chip stocks, but for sure that rotation is benefiting the SOX versus the Magnificent 7, which the FT yesterday has started to call the Maleficent 5, at least some of them in that group. Now, this next one is really interesting because it has to do with the developments in Japan. As you can see, the curves have been flattening across the board, really, in Japan. Today, though, we just saw a huge rise, particularly at the long end. This because of two governors that have been nominated by Sanae Takaichi to replace two retiring governors. Now, these new governors are seen to be dovish and also reflationist. So if they're going to be looking through inflation and the impacts of inflation on Japan, well, that's going to definitely give some trouble to JGBs. And you can see that on the long end, particularly the 30-year yield, which rose more than 10 basis points, and the 10-year yield, which was higher. The 40-year yield as well, of course, in Japan was up. As you can see, that yield curve may not stay so flat for so much longer. And then finally, let's take a look at consumer confidence, because we got that data yesterday, and then of course we had the State of the Union address. And as you might anticipate, there is a political divide, right? It was a hyper-partisan address, as we heard from our guest earlier, and you can see that in the data once again. So for a time it was moving in concert, right? Consumer confidence was pretty similar for Republicans, Democrats and Independents. But more recently, you can see that that has parted ways. So Democrats and Independents are very much less confident, particularly Democrats, where that reading was down to 41, than Republicans about the state of the economy. All right, to access, search and save all of the Bloomberg Terminal charts used on this show and across Bloomberg TV, Terminal subscribers can now use the brand new function, CHRT TV Go. And we're still in the thick of earnings season, of course. Lots more on those and interviews coming up in the next hour. We have the CEOs of Novo Nordisk and Agios and also E.ON. And the US Trade Representative Jameson Greer is going to be on surveillance. You won't want to miss that interview. That's at 1:30 p.m. UK time. All right, that is it for us for the moment. The opening trade, though, is up next and is going to continue all of these conversations and take you through to the market open in 1 hour, 3 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Bloomberg.